So please may I come in?
Yes, come in.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please be seated.
Thank you, sir.
Are you fully vaccinated?
Yes, sir.
No symptoms of COVID?
No, sir.
You may remove your mask.
Thank you, sir.
Abhijit Ray.
Yes, sir.
Please introduce yourself to the board.
Sir, my name is Abhijit Ray. I come from Siliguri in Darjeeling district of West Bengal. I have done my bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering from Delhi Technological University. After that, I worked as a firmware engineer in Texas Instruments in Bangalore. And since then, I've been preparing for the civil services.
Abhijit, you did your engineering from a very prestigious institute. Then you took up a job also in an equally prestigious company. Then why did you not continue there? You didn't like your job in the private sector?
Sir, it was an extremely good and extremely well-paying as well as challenging job. But sir, I was more attracted towards the diversity of civil services. Primarily, that was the reason that brought me here, sir.
Civil services, I fail to understand what kind of diversity this generation is looking for in the civil services.
So, if you consider the letters A to Z, for any of the letters, you can have a posting in some department or some work, sir, in civil services. While in the company that I worked, it would be diversity only in the electronics or in the firmware field, sir.
That brings me to the fundamental question. Why a large number of engineers are not wanting to pursue their career in their own field of education and instead wanting to go to civil side where the nature of job is very general. I fail to understand. Is there any problem of employability of engineers, or the engineers have ample job and they can leave the job and that spot will be filled by another engineer? What is the situation?
So, the primary difference, what I feel is difference from this civil service and the engineering is that in engineering, you go from a specialized to a more generalist sort of a role. You become a manager later on in your career. But in civil service, it's more of a generalist role that you start with, and later on, there is a chance of becoming a manager or it's more a specialized afterwards. So that I think is something that attracts people. Also, sir, there is a general scientific temperament and the ability to constructively or systematically study, which engineer would have been accustomed to right from his childhood, the competitive exams. That would be another reason, sir.
Okay, Abhijit, you are from Siliguri.
Yes, sir.
Darjeeling. Why is Darjeeling called the Queen of the Hill?
So primarily because of the beauty, and also, sir, it has been marketed very well by the government of India as part of the Incredible India, and also the government of West Bengal.
Okay, that is why it is called Queen of.
Yes, sir.
What do you know about the toy train there?
It's officially called the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway. It is one of the mountain railways which is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site in India. The other two are in Shimla and Nilgiri. So it's owned by the Indian Railways, and as of today, it has resumed services from Darjeeling to Siliguri, basically.
So it is on a narrow gauge, isn't it? What do you mean by a narrow gauge?
So narrow gauge, as far as I know, can range from 2 feet to 2 feet 10 inches. Darjeeling is 2 feet 6 inches narrow gauge. Yes, so that would be the reason why it's narrow gauge is because the topography and the soil capacity is not enough for broad gauge, sir.
So what is the speciality of this Batasya loop?
Sir, there is a technical reason why Batasya loop has been put. Sir, you see, the toy train tries to take an elevation through the hills, and you cannot directly have a straight line of that. So you need to go through a route where the distance, not the displacement, the distance is more. So the loop is used in many places, sir. Batasya loop is one of them, and the historical reason is that it is the Gorkha Martyrs Memorial.
Good. What is the importance of Ghum station?
It's India's highest railway station, and I think till few years back, it was the highest in the world. Now it's the second highest in the world.
There's a famous monastery also near the, what monastery is that?
It's called the Ghum Monastery, sir.
Ghum Monastery. Why it is so popular there?
Sir, primarily because it's one of the biggest, and secondly, many celebrities have come there. For example, Benedict Cumberbatch, who plays Sherlock. That person has spent around, I think, 2 years in Ghum Monastery. That elevated it to its limelight, sir. One of the reasons.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Abhijit,
Yes, sir.
what's the connection of Siliguri and Surya Sen.
I'm not able to find a connection, sir. I would have to read up on it, sir.
Okay, something about Surya Sen.
So he was involved in the Chittagong armory raid, and also, sir, I believe he gave great impetus to involvement of women freedom fighters. For example, Kalpana Dutt and Pritilata Wadedar were the two female freedom fighters who were involved in the Chittagong armory raid and other activities, revolutionary activities. So that's what I can recall at the moment.
You have done BTech in electrical and electronics engineering. What's the difference between BTech and BE?
So I think it's just a terminology. In India, it's called BTech. In other countries, in America, for example, it's called BE. So
In India also, some institutions offer degrees which is named Bachelor of Engineering.
So I am not aware of the technical differences. I will not be able to say.
Okay. And you studied both electrical engineering and electronics engineering.
Yes, sir. Part of electronics, mostly it was electrical.
So what's the difference between these two?
So primary, technically speaking, electrical engineering deals with very high voltages, and electronics engineering is 3.3 or 5 volts based on the technology. Also, sir, semiconductors, for example, silicon, germanium, these things are used in electronics, not in electrical. And so electronics is more of decision making and intelligence that's put inside, let's say, an integrated circuit, whereas electrical is more of power transmission and high power capacities.
There is an organization called STPI. Have you heard the name?
Sir, I fail to recall.
Software Technology Parks of India.
Yes, sir.
When it was established and what is its role in electronics industry?
Sir, I will not be able to tell when it was established, but I think the role is to have a coherent set of principles to establish software technology parks across the country. I worked in Texas Instruments, which was in a software technology park called Bagmane Tech Park. As far as I remember, it was one of the pushes given by the STPI, sir.
Which other schemes they are running nowadays, STPI?
Sir, I will not be able to, I cannot remember.
Okay. There is another region which is called Hardware Technology Park. Are you aware when this Hardware Technology Park scheme was launched and what is the status of this
No,
scheme?
sir, I'm unaware, sir.
Okay, government is also implementing National Electronics Manufacturing Policy.
Yes, sir.
Targets, objectives, etc. Anything?
So it's basically to reduce the import dependency that we have today, and also to make India as one of the hubs for ESDM manufacturing. It includes both core parts of electronics as well as manufactured designed network products which can be used in value chain addition. So one of the schemes under that I can remember is production linked incentive that the government is giving around 4 to 6%. So that's what I can remember. It has linkages with the semiconductor mission also, where the government is giving 50% capex incentive.
And there is another scheme under the policy, Electronics Cluster Scheme.
So as far as I can recall, it's related to using economics of scale for multiple establishments to have in a single place.
Can you name any electronic manufacturing cluster in West Bengal?
Sir, I think one is there in Kamrahati. That's what I can recall. Sir.
Okay. Nowadays, government is running into high fiscal deficit, which is likely to increase in near future. What are the headwinds which are likely to increase fiscal deficit?
The first thing that I would say, sir, is the COVID pandemic. Many loans as part of the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan has been given forward. The results of that is not immediately seen, but in some years it will be seen. That's why the government has gone ahead and had a bad bank scheme sort of to reduce the damage of this. Another headwind, sir, that I can think of is the lack of formalization in the economy, because of which the firms aren't able to grow. And that, exacerbated by the lack of demand, would not allow the firms to have a profitability, sir, because of which they'll not be able to pay back. So that's what comes to my mind right now.
Okay, whenever we use these phrases headwinds and tailwinds, what do we mean to suggest?
So as far as I can understand, I think it means challenges.
Okay, headwinds. And what about tailwinds?
What previous challenges was existing, sir, but I'll have to read up on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Abhijit, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, sir.
Okay, Abhijit, please explain to me that you were a student in Darjeeling, which is your place, right? Then you left that place and you were studying in ICSE school, which is one of a better school in Darjeeling, St. Joseph School. And then you came all the way to Delhi to get into a cram school, which is known only for preparing engineering thing. And despite the fact that you had a good rank in the West Bay JEE, you took admission in Delhi.
Yes, sir.
What was the design behind it? Why you did so?
So there are few reasons. The first reason was, at the time when I made that decision, the ranking of Jadavpur University, where I had opted in West Bengal, was not as high as DTU. Also, sir, many of my friends were coming to Delhi who were in my school and in my area. And the third reason, sir, was that I had made up my mind that I will work in a startup while doing my BTech, which I did for third and fourth year. The opportunities for doing that was much more in Delhi. That's why I chose Delhi, sir.
So all those pain, all those bad food in that silly mess of Kalka public school, and obviously such a cramped school in your biodata, looking bad, all down the drain. You could have become aspirant even by doing a simple graduation from Darjeeling. Darjeeling has wonderful colleges.
So at that time, so my reason or my desire for the civil services grew after I joined Texas Instruments, not before that, sir. So in hindsight, I would say what you said could have been the course of action, but I'm very fortunate to have the opportunities that I've had, sir, while working in Texas Instruments, as well as the experience that I've had.
DTU is the university which is located at Bhavana. What are the important features of this village?
So I believe it's the interface region between Delhi NCR and Haryana. Also, sir, there is a famous dairy called Shahbar Dairy in Bhavana, in the region where my college is located. I think there are some agricultural fields in the region, sir, but I am...
You're an electrical engineer. There's important thermal power station in Bhavana.
Sir, I'll have to read up on it, sir.
So obviously you'll not be able to tell me which boilers it used.
I'm sorry, sir, I'll not...
Generally, the NTCPC plant, for example, the one in Delhi, which boilers are used?
Sir, I'll not be able to say, sir.
You're not happy about boilers?
Sir,
thermal power station, you must have studied in any case?
No, sir, we haven't studied.
Okay, let's leave that. Tell me what exactly is the difference between a FET, field effect transistor, and a MOSFET?
So, if we see term-wise also, the MOSFET means metal oxide semiconductor. So, the gate that is there in FET versus MOSFET, in metal oxide semiconductor, there is a metal layer and there is an oxide layer on top of the gate layer in MOSFET, because of which the gate signal, I think, is evenly distributed across the drainage channel, sir.
Right. And what is FET in general? Field effect transistor? How is it different from a normal NPN transistor?
Sir, I'm sorry, I'm unable to formulate an answer technically. I'm sorry, sir.
You're coming from Bengal and you have that Royal Bengal tigers.
Yes, sir.
How Royal Bengal tigers are different from other tigers in the country, geologically speaking?
Their coat that they have is very different. It's an orange and black striped coat. Also, sir, Royal Bengal tigers have more bone density than the normal tigers, than the other tigers.
What is the geological name of Royal Bengal tiger?
Panthera tigris.
Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Abhijit.
Yes, ma'am.
Continuing with the ecology, create an ecological tourist circuit from your state.
Ma'am, so the people who would be coming in would normally be coming in from the airport or Kolkata. So I would select the East Kolkata wetland first, because there is a lot of migratory birds that come there. Then I would go to Sundarbans, which is very nearby, not very nearby, but nearby. Then I would do the Ganga, the stretch of Ganga in Murshidabad and Malda, which is a little towards the north. So we are going from south to the north. Then of course I would come to Darjeeling, the region near Jor Bungalow and Ghum. There is a lot of ecologically based tourist initiatives that are taken up. And then I would bring them back to Kolkata.
Okay. As a student of anthropology, tell me how are man and woman different on evolutional scale?
Ma'am, biologically and chromosomically, I don't know if that's a word, but biologically they are different because of the chromosomes that are different. So the morphological features differ. There are other physiological indicators like pulse rate as well as the body fat deposition rates, which are different from men and women. That also is related to the evolution that you mentioned, because women have the responsibility of bearing a child. Ma'am, that's what I can come up with right now.
And if we look socially, in the perspective of evolution, how socially difference started coming up in male and female? So how the concept of gender emerged?
There are multiple theories behind this, but the most ascribed theory is that earlier there was no concept of family. Then large groups of male-dominated societies came up, or many males and many females came up. Then came a group of females with much larger number of males. So then the concept of gender difference came up because of that. And ma'am, another reason is that since women have the responsibility of bearing a child, and since they are relatively vulnerable just after childbirth, so there came up a need for men to take care of their immediate needs. That gave result to marriage, and because of marriage there needed to be a mechanism to differentiate between the two socially. So then gender came about, ma'am. Gender identity got magnified, I would say.
Okay. Your father works with leprosy vision, I guess. Why was it so feared as a disease in earlier times?
Ma'am, earlier times, because we did not know how the thing spread, and there was very large amount of stigma associated with it because of the deformities of the body. That's why it was primarily feared earlier. The stigma still remains, although we have made great progress from a therapeutic perspective. The NLEP program has reduced the number of incidences, but there are laws in our country which are still magnify the stigma. For example, the Railway Act does not allow or legally gives a provision for leprosy patients not to be allowed to travel in railway carriages even today. So there is a lot to be desired to reduce the stigma of these laws, ma'am.
Recently, a law was also repealed regarding their stay or residence. You know about that law?
Ma'am, unable to recall, but I have heard of it. Something related to they would be allowed to stay at homes or in their families is what I can recall, ma'am. I can't recall anything more than that.
Okay. So my last question to you, tell me, you do reflective poem writing. Can there be a poem which is not reflective? Can a poet write something without
Yes, ma'am,
reflection?
definitely. So reflective is what we think it is penned down in words. There is the other form which is lyrical poetry, which has musical connotation to it, and also more importantly it is based on the emotions and feelings. So yes, that definitely can be, ma'am.
So in your poems, the lyrics are not that important, is it?
The rhyme is important, but it's more of what thoughts come in my mind which I portray in words. That's more important in my poems.
Okay.
I like to write such poems.
Thank you, Abhijit.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening.
Good evening.
What kind of governance structure do you have in Darjeeling?
Ma'am, since 2011, because of the Gorkha agitation, we have a special autonomous body called Gorkha Territorial Administration, ma'am.
So is it a 6th schedule area, or it has its separate existence of its own?
It is under the provisions of the 6th schedule, but it's based on a state legislative act, ma'am, as far as I remember.
State legislative act?
As far as I remember, ma'am.
You don't need a parliamentary act for the same and constitutional amendment in that regard?
In my limited knowledge, it is required when the central government directly is administering the area. For example, the Ladakh Hill Council was based on the Parliamentary Act. But since there is a state government in West Bengal, I understand that it's the state law that is required, ma'am. There is a state legislation.
You sure about this?
I'm sure that there is a law.
There was no
state,
constitutional amendment done to introduce GTA?
Not GTA, and that was one of the concerns raised by the DGHC, saying that we need to have a constitutional amendment because DGHC as a word exists in the 6th schedule. So there was a clamor for that, ma'am.
Okay. So what kind of special legislative and executive powers does this council have?
Ma'am, it has powers specially for the local laws, and it has the power to introduce local taxes. For example, any tourist cars or any cars that come inside the GTA, they are taxed.
Okay. So what kind of areas where it can make laws? What subjects have been included there?
I don't have the exact names, ma'am, but I am sure that policing is not part of it. Ma'am, that's all I can recall. I'll have to read up on
reverse engineer things, no? What are not there, you kind of go and see the answer there. Is it the way you think?
Not really, ma'am. Whatever helps me come to a...
Okay. What about judicial powers? Does this council have any judicial powers?
Ma'am, I'll not be able to speak intelligently on that. I'm sorry. I'll have to read up on it.
Okay, so let's leave that topic right then. Okay, tell me, what is the importance of mangrove ecosystem? Why are they important?
Ma'am, mangroves are present mostly in areas which are interfaces between coastal and land ecosystems.
Everywhere? Wherever there's a coastal and land interface, where there I'll find mangroves?
As far as I think, ma'am, yes.
Nothing special, nothing related to anything?
Ma'am, saline
Salinity?
ecosystems.
Okay.
So the mangroves have pneumatophores basically. So in muddy saline areas, they are able to get greater air, as far as I can recall. And also, ma'am, the importance of that is they help to purify the water. I'm not exactly sure. They help to purify the water is what I can remember.
Anything else which has been coming up as their recent advantages?
They help to reduce the erosion of the banks.
Mm-hmm.
They help to reduce the onslaught of cyclones. That's what I can
So
recall.
where all apart from West Bengal will I find mangroves in India?
Ma'am, you will find mangroves in Andhra Pradesh. I'm not recalling the name, ma'am. Andhra Pradesh is there. Koringa Mangrove Reserve, I think.
Okay. Any other state? Any western coastal states I'll find mangroves? Or is it a feature of eastern coastal states only?
Ma'am, I'm unable to recall at the moment.
Okay. And if I ask you what kind of pattern we are observing in cyclones in India in context of Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, is there any change or is there any pattern which is emerging today?
Ma'am, the intensity of cyclones has increased.
Okay.
The timing of the cyclones in the months that it normally hits, that has seen change in recent years. We had Amphan at a time when it was not expected. And I said intensity. So, and ma'am, that's what I can recall.
Okay. No any difference which you make in Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea?
Arabian Sea, by and large, is supposed to have lesser number of cyclones.
So is this trend continuing or are we seeing any changes in that?
We are seeing more cyclones in Arabian Sea also, rather in historically speaking.
Okay. So do we have temperate cyclones in India?
We have temperate cyclones induced disturbances that come to India.
Okay. And what are they called?
Western disturbances, ma'am.
Okay. And what are they responsible for?
Bringing in, they're responsible for bringing in winter rain to Punjab and rain to the eastern, it would be the western Himalayas, snow in the western Himalayas.
Snow.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So my last question to you. If I ask you to choose 5 words to define your vision of India.
Tolerant,
Okay.
educated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, words are not coming in my mind, so I'm really sorry, ma'am.
Okay, you can choose phrases.
We would
Or
want
you can just elaborate the concept
Yes, ma'am.
in 2-3 lines.
I envision an India which is accommodative of all religions, all beliefs. Also, ma'am, an India which is able to reap its demographic dividend, well educated, not only on paper but also substantially. For example, our civic sense should improve. Ma'am, that's what comes to my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Abhijit,
Yes, sir.
when we think of agricultural based industries in West Bengal, 2 things come to our mind. One is jute, another is tea. Bengal is one of the rather the largest producer of jute. So is tea. But lakhs and lakhs of people are employed in the jute industry and tea industry. But why they are still struggling? Why government has not taken any concrete measures to ameliorate their condition?
So, to address this specifically to jute first. So, after independence, most of the jute producing areas remained in Bangladesh, whereas we just had the industries. Because of this, the machines have not been updated. That's one reason. And the second reason for jute is that the labor unions have sort of stalled the progress or modernization of the machines. So recently there was a center-state tussle regarding the center capped the prices of jute, raw jute, which the state objected to. So center-state tussle would be one reason. And so coming to tea, we do have a lot of tea gardens and a lot of people work in there. But so the working conditions are not up to the mark. For example, there is scarcity of water, scarcity of basic accommodation that is supposed to be provided under the Plantation Labour Act. So the Tea Act actually empowers the central government to take over the management of tea gardens which are not working for the welfare of tea workers as well as commercially viable. But it is seen that the center is unwilling to take over. and the center state tussle is again comes in the picture. So going forward for tea garden specifically, I think, sir, there should be a decentralized assessment, decentralized regulation of it. I believe, sir, the GTA, that's the local autonomous body, that should be given the responsibility, because as of today, the center is supposed to market the tea, whereas the states are supposed to regulate the tea gardens. It creates sort of a jurisdictional conflict.
Okay, one last question before we let you go.
Yes, sir.
Tell me why the state of Bengal is constantly at loggerheads with the center?
So differing political ideologies would be the most obvious reason. So there is a climate of political violence which erupts every now and then, specifically after elections. So it is a perception in among West Bengal government that this state does not get the developmental benefits as much as the other states. So that is what comes to my mind.
Okay, thank you very much, Abhijit. Your interview is over. You may go now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
So, Abhijit, how was your experience and how do you evaluate your performance?
So the experience was enlightening, I would say. Performance, so it was better than moderate, I would say.
You are a good candidate, a wonderful candidate, a nice candidate for the civil services.
Thank you,
The
sir.
qualities of a civil servant are there in you. So you are very honest, upright, appears to be very honest and upright. Honesty of purpose, as I always call, honesty of purpose is there in you.
Thank you.
You are a natural person, and you stayed calm and composed and remained confident at the same time. So by and large, no major problem with you. Only thing is when you go for the interview, try to be humble, polite all the time. Secondly, don't get argumentative on any issue. Even if it is an emotional issue, don't get into any argument.
Sir, did I do
No,
that?
you did not. I'm just giving you a general. I told you at the beginning itself that we did not find any fault with your performance. Just by way of advice, we are telling you, when you go there, never get into that area. Never hazard a guess. If you don't know the answer, admit that you don't know. But don't enter into the area of guesswork without seeking prior approval of the member.
Yes, sir.
And provided you know something of that, isn't it? Then your name is Abhijit. Charu Majumdar's son was Abhijit.
Yes, I
Okay.
wasn't aware.
So if somebody is very knowledgeable sitting there, he may ask you.
Right,
Then the whole your Naxal
Thing will come up.
yeah. So how it has affected tribal life and all that. If at all, if you get any time, just spend a few hours on that. It's just taking a chance if somebody asks you. Regarding your GTA and all that, when you go back, you read whether the center has passed any law or not. So just cross-check it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just to otherwise, all right. Your this thing was very balanced. Views were very balanced. That is what is required. So absolutely wonderful performance. In one word, anything you want to ask?
No, sir. You give me comprehensive feedback. Thank you.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Do well.
Thank you.
You'll
Thank
do
you,
well.
ma'am.
No
Thank
doubt.
you.